Britain's most disgraced royal is back in the headlines this Christmas. That's following revelations that Prince Andrew was close friends with an alleged Chinese spy who was banned from entering Britain on national security grounds last year. The alleged spy, a businessman by the name of Yang Tengbo, was so close to Andrew that the prince invited him to his birthday party in 2020, and Andrew even gave Yang permission to act on his behalf in making business and investment contacts for him in China. Now, this story is, of course, just the latest in a long string of scandals involving the former Queen's favourite son. These range from Andrew's association with dead paedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein to allegations made by Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre that Andrew had raped her when she was 17. Andrew reportedly settled a civil case that Giuffre brought against him in a New York court for $12 million in 2022, and the allegations led to him being effectively sacked by the royal family, banned from carrying out official events and deprived of his £250,000 per year grant. Don't feel too sorry for him, though. Andrew's brother Charles still continued to pay him £1 million a year, an allowance that Charles only cut off last month. Now, Andrew's poor judgment and shady friends have often made him the centre of press attention. But this latest story about the prince's dodgy connections isn't the only revelation about the royals we've had this year. There was a much more important scandal involving much more important royals, although you may have missed it. Because while Andrew is often accused of relying on favours from despots and desperate businessmen to fund his lifestyle, we learned that the king and his eldest son William have an even better scheme for filling up their coffers, exploiting the taxpayer. But while the British press were happy to expose Andrew's dodgy dealings, it was a different story when King Charles and his heir were in the crosshairs. It all began with this documentary from Channel 4's Dispatches, the result of a joint investigation with the Sunday Times.
The NHS is another publicly funded body that Charles has been keen to support.
The NHS and the entire country has been through the most testing time in the service's history. And in tribute to them, we have come together as a nation to thank them for their skill, professionalism, and dedication.
We have discovered that the NHS is helping to fund the King's income. Last year, his private estate, the Duchy of Lancaster, announced it was delighted to be able to help and support Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust in London to find a home for its new ambulance fleet. What it didn't make clear was that the deal was worth £11.4 million over 15 years.
That £11.5 million deal to rent a property to the NHS is just one of the ways that Charles and William are personally profiting from taxpayer money. They also have secret deals with the Ministry of Defence, local schools, providers of essential services and local councils, charging commercial rents on buildings and land and taking feudal fees for access to riverbanks, beaches and rivers. The two most senior royals take in the cash through their private investment and property portfolios. For Charles, that's the Duchy of Lancaster, worth around £650 million. For William, it's the Duchy of Cornwall, valued at around £1.2 billion. Together, the two duchies consist of 5,410 properties spread over 180,000 acres of England and Wales. They include huge swathes of countryside, seashores, and even whole towns, all snatched up by their royal predecessors centuries ago. And these properties are very profitable. Since the 1980s, profits from both estates have grown by around 1,000%, making 10 times more each year than they were 40 years ago. In 2023, Charles took £26 million from the Duchy of Lancaster, while William pocketed around £24 million from the Duchy of Cornwall. And that's money that goes into their personal accounts to be used for whatever they want. Now, you might think this is no big deal. Surprise, surprise, it turns out that our head of state and his son are fleecing the plebs like any other landlord. Except the head of state and his son aren't treated like other landlords. Neither of the two duchies pay either corporation tax or capital gains tax on their profits, a fact that even Parliament can't seem to get to the bottom of. Margaret Hodge, former MP and chair of the Public Accounts Committee in Westminster, told Dispatches this.
When you actually look at the activity that takes place in these duchies, a lot of them is property transactions, huge property portfolios. I think there is a wrong commercial advantage to the Duchy of Cornwall and to the Duchy of Lancaster in that they don't pay the taxes that an ordinary business would have to pay.
The Duchy of Lancaster told us it operates as a commercial company, but said it couldn't comment on royal finances in general. The Duchy of Cornwall told us it is a private estate with a commercial imperative. Attempts by Parliament to understand just why tax isn't paid have never got very far.
Well, there's something shockingly wrong with a system where you allow a lot of profits to be made out of property and you're not finding a way of taxing it properly. If you're saying the system is such that none of these property empires make tax, so therefore the Duchy of Cornwall shouldn't pay tax, that's a shocking thing to say.
The Duchy is a very unusual organisation. It's a private estate. It's not a corporation. It's a private estate in many respects like other private estates, but in one or two respects not like a private estate.
I mean, to be absolutely honest, I probably was able to calculate more readily what Google should have paid us in taxes and Amazon and Starbucks than I was able to see whether or not public money was being properly used and whether or not the royal family, through these organisations, were making a proper contribution back into the public purse for the public good.
Charles's lust for tax-free profit even encompasses his pet passion, environmentalism. This is from that Dispatches episode again.
Publicly, King Charles has said he does not want to boost his fortune when it comes to green energy. Wind farms at sea have earned a fortune for the Crown Estate. As its profits rise, so does the amount Charles gets from the sovereign grant. These profits were set to soar dramatically, and Charles gained much praise and publicity by announcing he would hand some of his share back to the people.
King Charles has asked for a surge in profits from 6 new offshore wind farms to be used for public good rather than go to his own pocket. It's expected to make a massive profit this year for the King, in part because of 6 new wind farms.
But our documents reveal that out of the public eye, the Duchy of Lancaster is set to continue profiting handsomely from wind farms. We have found leases that show the King is set to receive a massive income stream from power cables crossing his land on the Lancashire coast from wind farms. Rent from just 5 leases are due to pay out a minimum of £28 million.
King Charles said that he would waive some of the profits from wind farm development in the North Sea from the Crown Estate. But he's made no similar declaration around profits made from the Duchy of Lancaster in this regard. Ultimately, any additional charges that are being charged by landowners here is going to add to the cost of energy. What we don't need is sort of rents being charged simply for access to this foreshore that has been owned by a medieval institution since time immemorial.
Now, the monarch and his offspring tend to try and justify their existence by pointing to all the charitable work they do, serving as patrons for a range of non-profits. But even that's not for free.
We've discovered millions of pounds in rent secretly flowing from charities into Charles and now William's pocket. Camelford House in London, owned by the Duchy of Cornwall for decades. In 2005, the royals received a share of the building's rents. Among the tenants are charities like Comic Relief and other charities that the King is a patron of, such as the end-of-life care charity Marie Curie and Macmillan, the cancer charity.
Now, I've been very proud to be patron of Macmillan Cancer Support for the last 23 years.
Since the deal began, we can reveal it's earned the duchy at least £22 million.
Perhaps the worst aspect of the documentary was the way the King and the Prince of Wales treat their individual tenants. Because not only are they corporate landlords, our royal family seem to be slum landlords too.
Some tenants say they are in fuel poverty and their homes are cold and hard to heat. One sent us photos of mould and watermarks that appear every winter. None felt able to go public with their criticism of the Duchy of Cornwall. They told us,
"It gets miserably cold in winter. I can only heat 2 rooms in my home."
When the wind blows, the curtains start swinging. There's no heating upstairs at all.
The house is cold and it's a struggle, but there's nowhere else to live here. They're not good landlords.
Yeah, so this one here.
we showed our evidence to the chairman of the Property Energy Professionals Association.
Well, this is the worst performing kind of property. It is more likely to be a cold, drafty, hard to heat property. The rating is very, very low indeed. In terms of carbon emissions, this is a very polluting property. 13 tonnes of carbon, which is more than double a typical property in the UK. I would kind of expect to see a very small landlord here, somebody who doesn't really understand the regulations. Maybe they're a landlord that doesn't care about the regulations and are just hoping they don't get noticed.
Now, when that documentary aired on the 2nd of November, there was a pretty powerful backlash from the public.
They always say it's about duty and service.
Yes.
How can you be among the richest people on the planet and need to be paid huge sums of money to do a job that many people would give their eye teeth to do? You know, they consider it work to sit in the royal box at Wimbledon and on finals day. No one else on earth would consider that work, but they say it's a duty.
I think we should all be quite angry.
Labour have set up an office of value for money. First one. Royals? ?
Valerie from York, you're up first. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I just think they are absolutely greedy, taking money out to the NHS, not paying tax, charging for schools, charging for a prison that isn't even used, charging for parking ambulances up. They're absolutely dead greedy as far as I'm concerned.
But Buckingham Palace's media team quickly swung into action, and it wasn't long before the media towed the line.
The Queen, Camilla, vows to do everything she can to help end domestic violence in an exclusive ITV documentary.
It's it's a heinous crime.
We'll be speaking to 2 women this morning, a senior police officer and an MP, both survivors who say Camilla's intervention will bring about change.
Plus, Mike Tyndall reveals what Princess Anne is like as a mother-in-law, and why he regrets not spending more time with the Queen, while James Haskell will tell us about Kate and William, what are they really like in private. All that to come this morning.
Good morning, Britain. The hardest year of my life. The words of Prince William as he describes 2024 as brutal. Following a visit to South Africa, the Prince of Wales spoke about how proud he was of his wife and his father, the King, after their cancer diagnoses.
His dad and his wife have had to have cancer treatment. That is no easy thing with such a young family. Yeah. And I think what this does show is, irrespective of your background and your privilege and the money they have and the best doctors, they both have still suffered the most, harrowing experience, and they've had to come through it as a family. And yes, we want to see more vulnerable people, because we then say, well, men don't speak anymore and they don't have the courage, and there's so many male suicides. And he's doing so much good by showing that vulnerability. Yeah.
It wasn't entirely a surprise as the princess arrived with the prince at the Royal Albert Hall. She had always made it clear this was a weekend she wanted to attend. But it is still rare to see her as she gradually returns to work.
I think it's pretty evident what's going on there, with the royals using not 1 but 2 cancer diagnoses to drum up public sympathy after they'd been outed as filling up their coffers on the public's buck. And while it's sad that Charles and Kate had cancer, of course it is, they also had access to the kind of medical care that you and I can only dream about. Now, it wasn't just the TV journalism that lapped up William's sob story. The newspapers lined up to do the same. These front pages are all from the 8th of November, carefully timed not to clash with the US election and its results that dominated the papers in the days before. "It's been brutal," says William on his family struggle, with a picture of the prince kind of glowing there. The Daily Mail led with the brutal line, again with a pensive-looking Kate, William and daughter Charlotte gazing off into an uncertain future. But my personal favourite was published by The Times, a newspaper that actually broke the royal financial scandal story just a few days earlier. They were so sorry for exposing the parasitic prince that they gave him an actual halo on their front page. What's the point of exposing the royals' secretive and exploitative greed if the media is going to whitewash it out of existence just days later? The coverage of the Dispatch's investigation faded away in just a couple of days, swept away by sentimentalism over a powerful and unelected family soaked in privilege and special protections. The Andrew story, though, well, that's going to run and run. Not because Andrew, an irrelevant minor royal already in complete disgrace, poses any serious national security risk, but because having the media focusing on him poses absolutely zero threat to the undemocratic, unaccountable, and uncriticisable institution that rules over us.